Alrighty guys, welcome back to the channel. It's been a little while. Today I got a little side project I'm going to be working on, and I'd like to run you through it. So what this is an SFI Bellhousing for a 4L80E, and it is built by FI Transmission. Now you can get these things at a very good price, $400 retail. And something that's super innovative about this, that some of you, if you've never really looked into putting an SFI bell housing on a 4L80, is that the bell housing is actually machined to fit the front of the pump. So maybe I will run you over to our kind of core transmission I got to test this out on, and I'll show you a couple details. Alright, so this is an early 4L80. It's like a 1993. Couple things change after 93, but nothing in this video. It's just to do with cooler line locations and things like that. So if you have a look at the factory bell housing around here, you will see this front face of the pump, and that's where our new bell housing bolts onto. Now the difference between the bell housing we have and this one, say your traditional SFI bell housing, is that our bell housing is machined to fit over top of those grooves on the pump. Now traditional bell housing setup on this, you machine the face of the pump, then you put on like a $600 or $700 adapter, and then you put on your $600 or $700 bell housing. But in the case of this bell housing, you get your $400 bell housing, which already has the grooves machined into it. So we still will have to machine the front surface of the pump flat. I'll show you what that's going to look like. But really, it's machine that front face flat, start trimming the bell housing, and this guy will fit up. Now, to make my life a little bit easier, I am going to tear down this transmission, but I'm not going to make you guys a full video on how I do that, because honestly there's a lot of videos on a 4L80 teardown that are way better than mine. But essentially the general process is pull the transmission filter out, pull all the valve body bolts off, reverse servo out, and then essentially you will take the pump bolts out. Once the pump bolts are out, you can actually pry with a big screwdriver, pop the pump out, and then start taking components out from the inside. Now, I will go through this in a lot of detail later, but just for people who just want to watch the video and see if they can do this, this is not rocket science. The pump machining, all we're doing on this is, you see, there's like a little bit of a shoulder there where the bolt sits. We're just going to machine, we're going to get this, go to the machine shop, they're going to put this on a rotary table, and they're just going to essentially have a milling bit like this. They will rotate the pump around, they get rid of the ears, they keep this portion, and they keep that portion. It goes back on. It's really not, it's not too crazy. I wouldn't get too worked up about this. So I'm gonna tear this down, and then I will reconvene with you shortly on some measurements and what we have to do to get this bell housing installed. And of course, the major benefit of an SFI bell housing is you don't have to run a flex plate shield, and ultimately the benefit is safety. Okay, so traditionally non-SFI bell housing automatics, they have to run a flex plate shield, which is a big piece of flat bar that goes all around the outside of the tranny and sticks out. Very hard to fit in your stock firewall location, usually requires a lot of hammering, and it makes the bell housing bolts almost impossible to get off. So the huge benefit here is that, number one, it's much safer obviously than a flex plate shield, but number two, it gives you a lot more space under the car. And now that you can get one of these things for $400, it totally makes sense to do this over ever using a flex plate shield. I'll show you the install is not going to be too hard. Alrighty, so this is going to be the general configuration that we're going to do everything to the case with. So what I've done, I have taken the entire transmission out, everything, there's nothing in it. This doesn't weigh anything anymore. We've got obviously overdrive clutch housing out, center support bolt out, center support out, tail shaft, everything out. There's really nothing in here anymore. And really the purpose of this is so it's nice and light, you can move it around easily, but obviously when it's all done, take it to your local machine shop or whoever's got a big steam cleaner, throw it in there, clean the case up nicely, it'll get all this dirt and junk off of here. So what I've got right now, I'm just going to start doing my measurements to see where we need to cut and how this thing's going to work, kind of wrap my head around it a little bit. So we've got the pump bolted into the front there. We have got no O-ring. There's an O-ring that goes on the outside of the pump. So it's a little bit hard to put in with the O-ring on, so we take that off. And then the obvious, when we want to remove the pump, you take the pump bolts out, and you can actually get a flathead in there, and you can pry the pump out. So you kind of work one side, you work that side, then you work that side, so on and so forth. It will come out quite easily without the O-ring. We should have the pump gasket on there for this operation. It's only 10 thou thick, but it's going to change the spacing off of the front of the pump. And ultimately what this all comes down to, every measurement on this from what I see is going to be relative to the pump, to the face on front of the pump. So let's try to do a couple measurements here, see what we see, so I can try to wrap my head around exactly where we cut this. All right, real quickly now what I'm going to do, I just did a little bit of looking, and I figured the best way for me to show you guys how to do this is to probably take the pump apart, and I'm going to show you how the front face sits across the bell housing. Then I'm going to take it to the machine shop, and I'm going to show you what they did. I'm going to tell you exactly what to tell them to do, and we will go from there. So pop this guy apart. Very hard with one hand. See that? Beauty. Okay, one very, very important thing. When you put this pump back together, you see these little dots and such. Just take a picture of this and make sure this goes back in the same way. How do you know if you got it back in the same way? Well, if you flip that 180 degrees, your torque converter won't go in. So you'll be taking the pump out and taking it apart. So it can only go in one way, but I just want you guys to know these dots essentially are facing towards the inside of the pump. Alrighty, now let me show you what we are going to be doing. So you can have a look. I've got the back half of the front half of the pump, mind you, just hanging out, chilling on the bell housing. And it is very obvious it does not fit all the way down because there are these big lugs on it. See those lugs? Not going to fit down. But what you will notice is that if those lugs weren't there, the case is actually machined out. Like you see this big bump here? The bell housing's actually machined out for it. There's also this piece here. Bell housing's machined out for it. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring this to the machine shop, and we're going to bring this to the machine shop, and we are going to tell them we want these lugs removed. Okay, so they'll remove all the lugs, and then we also want this surface face down. We'll want them to flatten this surface out. So at the machine shop, what they'll do is they will clamp this in something called a rotary table, where they have a knob here that they can spin and it will rotate it. They will have an end mill on the end, and the end mill will just trim across this face. Cut, cut, cut. And when they get to this point right here where that bump is, they will stop. And how much do you stop? Well, somewhere between right at that edge, because obviously anything inside of here doesn't need that anymore. Okay, so they will machine the pump face all around, and essentially then after they do that, the pump face is going to sit flush on here. This sounds complicated. For a machine shop, this is probably going to take them maybe 1 hour. So like, it's not a high dollar or costly or complicated operation. Okay, and so after this face is machined, essentially that face is going to be your datum point for how you mark the case. So you can imagine with this pump back in the face, we see this lip all around. It's going to be sitting right there against the pump, so we can measure this distance. It's like almost 1/8 of an inch, 0.118. Okay, so we know that off of this pump face our cut line needs to be 0.118 inches behind it. Alrighty, so we have got our pump back from the machine shop, so we will throw it together quickly. And what I've done is essentially used a big hose clamp. So I put the gears back in it with the dots in the correct orientation that I showed you ages ago when I took it apart. And yeah, I've essentially put a big hose clamp around the two halves, and you put the bolts in snug, tighten the hose clamp up, then you tighten the bolts on the back side, and that's done. So this is what the machined pump face looks like, and you'll see all around here there's this little recess there, and we've just gone essentially flush with there. So took off a very, very small amount, just enough to get this one uniform face. You'll see he's gone around the channels and various grooves. So there's a little bit of fitting to be done with this. You want to make sure you give the machine shop the bell housing with this, just to make sure these things line up appropriately. So what we're going to do is we will install the pump back in the case, and we will use it to mark where to cut for the bell housing. Now, if you take a look at this measurement here, it's about just under 1/8 of an inch. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the pump back onto the case, and we're going to mark that location, and I'll show you how I do that. But we're going to essentially mark, we know that 1/8 of an inch behind this face is that face. So really we want to just mark essentially 1/8 of an inch behind here on the inside of the case, and then we can start cutting it, which should be exciting and somewhat scary. All right, so I've got the pump bolted back in here, and as we had discussed, we were going to take this face and we were going to go 1/8 of an inch behind it, or very close to it, and let's just see what this measurement actually is. 146. Okay, so essentially what's going to happen then is this back face is more or less where we're cutting the tranny to, and this is what I expected, but I wasn't totally sure. So that's pretty cool. One thing you'll know, if you've ever looked at like a Turbo 400 or something similar, is the bell housing, it doesn't actually sit against this face, right? It's getting bolted to the pump. So there's no actual requirement for the back face of the bell housing to be touching this. It's getting bolted to the pump. That's where all the structure is. This back face isn't really doing anything, but we're gonna get it very close. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna mark this thing out. And so for starters, I guess around this section here, I'm gonna leave this lip out and I'm gonna fit it in later. But more or less this section here, we're gonna kind of mark around here, and we will just cut this tight all the way around, like so. And we'll see where that gets us, and then we can start kind of mocking up the bell housing. But the ultimate goal is obviously essentially this back face. So if there's a little bit of a gap between the bell housing where you cut it and your new bell housing, that's okay. Like I say, Turbo 400, maybe it's 1/16 of an inch or something. I want to get it as tight as I can because it looks the best, but is it actually a requirement? Not really. A little bit of work to be done on this bottom lip. So preliminary, what I'm suspecting is this bottom lip probably just gets cut in a straight line all the way across this straight section, and then the bell housing should notch up on it. But it's easy to cut and it's very hard to put material back here. So we're just going to start off easy, and we're just going to go for one basic cut around, and we're going to see where that gets us. All right, so I've got the basic shape I want to cut marked out. Now I know that this is going to be too big. I'm gonna have to grind a lot of this material off after, but that's fine. You wanna be able to slowly fit your way in. So one thing I did, drilled a bunch of holes on my marks. So now when I flip the bell housing over, I'll be able to know exactly where these points are and then cut it from the outside, which will be much easier. All right, so this is the outside of the bell. You can see I just followed my holes around, traced out the cut. We obviously all know this is gonna go more like that in the future, but that's fine. So I'm gonna bust out the grinder and I'm going to start angle grinding, and I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. Alrighty, first stage of cutting is done. Make sure you use PPE when you're doing this, guys. Like seriously, earmuffs, gloves, safety glasses, mask. It is nasty. Like aluminum is nasty, nasty stuff. It's very, very bad for you as well. But yeah, I mean, this is the first stage of cutting here. So now that I can actually see what's going to happen down here, I'm pretty confident now with essentially running this line down. I'll just double check it on the bell housing. We'll chop that off, and you'll see when you zip cut it from the outside, I just used a regular aluminum zip disc here. It works very, very well. You can see this thing already looks fast, even though it's a spare case I've got. So I'm gonna just quickly clean all this stuff up really good with brake clean so I can see clear marks on it. And I'm just gonna take a look at that bell housing. I'm gonna mark it out, and I'm gonna show you what our next cut looks like, and then yeah, then we can actually test fit the bell on here. It's not gonna be right yet, but I'm stoked to see how it looks. All right, so based on what my brain can comprehend here, if you have a look at the case, you'll see that essentially we need the case to be mating flush up against this surface until about the bottom of the pump, okay? You can see there's that straight line there. So when you look at the front of the pump, that straight line I'm talking about is actually these bosses here for the oil pan. So what I think our cut is going to look like is we will bring this one down, out, we will stay wide here, and then here again we will go straight across. This is going to eventually go in, I believe, and then back up. So if you think about it, essentially this bottom pan rail, you want to keep it as wide as possible out to the outer boss, and then we will just go straight down here to meet up flush with the case until about this point. So let me put a cut into it and we will see how it looks. All right, so you'll see at this point we are still not quite there. Still have a little ways to go and some trimming to do. We're starting to rough it in. I think we're starting to get down to the kind of the fine details here. So let me mark this thing up and I'll show you what I'm gonna do. All right, so as we had kind of stated earlier, is that this face essentially we need to be 1/8 of an inch behind this face here. So at this point you can start to take like a ruler like this, and you'll see some points are good and some are not. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to go around with the ruler. I'm going to see where is high and where is low. Then I'm just going to mark it with a red pen on the face, and then I'll get an idea kind of where I have to cut. Like obviously these spots with these holes, I'm going to have to sand those down smooth. A couple little edges here to touch up. But yeah, I think the idea here, it's going to bolt the pump in to make sure it's all the way in. Use this guy, figure out where we're flush, where we're not. I will get everything flush, or as close to flush as I can get. And then what I'll do is I will then just offset those areas after they're all flush 1/8 of an inch back, which is very easy for me to do with calipers or something like that. Then I can pretty much take that final trim off and we should be very close. All right, so what I've done is I've taken a set square, set it to 1/8 of an inch, and used a scribe, and essentially gone around like so, and just scribed the line. So now I'm gonna take my flapper disc and I'm just gonna sand it all to this line, all the way around the case, and we should be getting very, very close at this point. So the very last thing we'll do is we'll take the bell housing and then we will just kind of fine tune and fine fit a few areas. I just like to take all the precision out of it until the very, very end. We want to get it as close to perfect as we can, and then any little bit of extra fitting at the end we can do shouldn't be a problem. But at least this way we're playing with 1/16 of an inch or, you know, less, as opposed to, you know, trying to hold the bell housing and see which areas to grind down way before. So you can see that this is, it's not totally precise, but I mean, as far as doing the work with an angle grinder, I think it's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it so far. So we will take our flapper disc, we'll grind that down, and we'll see what it looks like after. All right guys, so final trimming is done. I followed my line around here. It was actually a little bit too deep. I could have gone a little bit shallower, but more than happy with this. So I'll just show you here to install the bell. Just take it like so. All right, we are getting very close now. I thought I was done, but I wasn't done, and I just figured something out, so I will show you. So you can see we're using an angle grinder here, so this isn't super precise, but man, it's pretty actually kind of impressed. I didn't think that was gonna work out that well. So what I've got now is just a 10 thou feeler gauge, and I'm just kind of going around the back of the bell, see where it fits. You can see like here, it fits really good. And it kind of stops here. So I'm just grabbing a Sharpie here. I will mark here. And you see it kind of fits again here. So I will mark there. Kind of doesn't fit at all here. Oh, it fits again there. So I know this whole section just needs a very light touch up. It's good down at the bottom. This section here too. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna do that, kind of go around the whole bell housing and check it out. And the reason I figured this out is because, well, I'll show you in the light later, but you can see how close everything is here and how tight it's fitting onto the pump. So I'm gonna go around with my feeler gauge. I'm gonna make some minor touch-ups and we will try it again. All right, so all the final touch-ups have been done. One thing I will note is these tabs, you need to sand these tabs flush. There's one, there's two, and there's three. Let me fit this up one final time and I'll show you guys the finished product. All right, we are all done. So here's what the back of the transmission looks like. You can see there's a very, very slight gap all the way around. This is the front. See, this fits in here nicely. It's a little hard to tell with this camera, but you just want to kind of check that your gap is even all the way around. You can take the pump off and fit it to the bell housing just so you understand how big that gap is supposed to be. But there is a little bit of a gap there, and that's just fine. But overall, I'm very happy with how this turned out. This is obviously an ugly old case. It's got to be sent out and cleaned before I put it back together with anything that I care about. But it was kind of just a test meal, and I'm really happy with how this turned out. So this is an old case. This is the earliest 4L80 case. I think this is like a 1994. But this bell housing, when I got it from FI, they had never tried it on an old case before. But it definitely works just fine on the old case. So this was designed for the new case, but really there's clearly no difference between the two. It'd be really nice to be able to do this on a milling machine, but like, do you have to get the case milled? Absolutely not. Like, there's no reason you can't do this in your backyard with an angle grinder like I just did. Obviously the pump itself, that needs to go to a machine shop, but like, all said and done, guys, this bell housing is $400 and it cost me $200 to get the pump machined. So realistically, this bell and the machine work on the pump is cheaper than just the adapter if you're going to do this using one of the available adapters and bell housings. If you were to do this the traditional way, you'd be looking at well over double what this costs. You'd probably be looking at about $1,200. So this is a great way to save a whole bunch of money, do an SFI case, keep yourself safe. And it's one of those rare things you see these days on old parts like this that's actually a legitimate innovation. So huge shout out to Daniel, FI Transmission, for helping me with this. If you guys want one of these bell housings, you can shoot me a message on Instagram or Facebook. Alternately, you can contact FI Transmission. His name's Daniel, FI Transmission on Facebook as well, and he'll be able to help you out. But if you'd like to get a referral from me, let me know. As always, guys, thanks for watching the channel. I appreciate it. Little sneak peek of the Mustang here. She's almost ready to run, and we're gonna go really, really fast with that car this year. So yeah, let me know down in the comments below if you have any questions, and don't be afraid to do this yourself. I'd say all in all, like maybe out of 10 skill level required here, this is probably like, I don't know, I would say a 5, because at the end of the day, I was playing around trying to get this gap super tight so it looks all pretty, which it does, but that doesn't have to be as precise as I've tried to make it. And truthfully, I probably went a little too crazy on it. Just time-wise, all in to do this, I'm probably 3 hours maximum into doing this, including making the video. I think you could get it done probably a little quicker than that. Tools, all you really need is an angle grinder, a zip cut disc, and a flap wheel. So minimally expensive. So if you guys do decide to go this route and try it out, please let me know how it works out for you, because I'd be very excited to hear if you're as thrilled with this as I am. So as always, guys, thanks a lot, and we will see you on the next one.